Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, all about the Timberwolves' Game 4 victory over the Memphis Grizzlies on Saturday. We're going to break down exactly why Karl-Anthony Towns was so much better in Game 4 than he was in Game 3. Also, the Timberwolves' defensive strategy on Ja Morant and why I do think it's sustainable. And I think forcing Desmond Bane to beat you is the way to go moving forward in the series. We're going to break it all down on the show today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered with this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Happy Monday, everybody. And it's a victory Monday. The Timberwolves, of course, won Game 4 on Saturday night, earning, a split at home. Series is tied 2-2 going back to Memphis Tuesday night. We're going to break down a ton of key points from the game on Saturday, what that can tell us moving into Tuesday. First of all, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, the show is free and available everywhere you find podcasts. That now includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, the all-new Odyssey app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at B Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right, so what I want to do today, I want to get into I guess it's really like four or five key takeaways from the game on Saturday, and why I think a couple of things the Wolves did are sustainable moving forward in the rest of the series, which is now effectively a 3-game series. Obviously, games 5 and if necessary, game 7 in Memphis, game 6 in Minnesota, Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. So 2 days off before game 5, and then another 2 days off in between before game 6, which will be back in Minneapolis next Friday night. So let's start with the Karl-Anthony Towns conversation. And I'll basically for the show today, I want to talk about Karl-Anthony Towns, why Cat was so much better in game 4 versus game 3, what he did better, what the Timberwolves coaching staff did better in terms of scheme, execution, etc. And then I want to talk about D'Angelo Russell. I want to talk about why I think he had a better game than the box score might suggest on Saturday. And then the Wolves defense as well, the defense on Ja Morant, and their strategy and why I really like what they did on Saturday versus what they did earlier in the series, or at least why the execution was better. I don't know that the scheme itself defensively is that much different. The execution was just a little bit more crisp on Saturday than it had been previously. So let's start with Karl-Anthony Towns. So Cat started the game with excuse me, with a strong first quarter. And I think that was more just activity, overall determination than it was really anything scheme wise the Wolves did differently. That the Grizzlies continued to double team him. The Wolves kept giving him the ball in the low post, and Minnesota just wasn't quick with or I should say, they really just weren't smart with their spacing more than anything else. And Towns wasn't quick with his decision making with the ball in his hands. Brandon Clark often was forcing, and Xavier Tillman were forcing Karl-Anthony Towns down deeper into the post towards the baseline. Help was coming from the backside, often Jaren Jackson Jr. until he got into foul trouble. And Towns just wasn't making quick decisions. With Vando in the dunker spot on the opposite side, it allowed, the guys who were essentially on the weak side to guard 2, right? Oftentimes it was Dylan Brooks. Occasionally it was the guards, whether it's Ja Morant or Tyus Jones, throughout the game. They were able to guard 2 because Vando really can only stay within 10 feet of the basket to be anything of a threat, really like 6 to 8 feet from the basket. And in order to be effective, Towns has to make quicker decisions, whether that's splitting the double team. We saw him do that sometimes, kicking it right back out of the double team, a skip past the opposite side. We've seen him get in trouble doing that in terms of turnovers. And he had, I think, 4 first quarter turnovers in this game as it was. But the decision-making was just a little bit slow. He did enough damage otherwise, though, to still be effective early. As the game wore on, Minnesota was more creative with how they were using Karl-Anthony Towns. The biggest thing for me was the Wolves used him more at the elbows in the middle of the floor. More so, the closer to the middle of the floor you are, the harder it is to double team, right? We've seen that throughout the season. The Wolves got better at this as the season wore on. Teams were doubling him in the post. Then they were preparing for him on the perimeter by kind of loading up that side of the floor. But the best way for Towns to be effective is to get the ball at the elbows, at the nail, really right around the middle of the floor, and to operate from there. And from there, he can obviously back his defender down into the paint and draw more defenders that way and kick the ball to the perimeter. He can shoot the mid-range. He can could shoot a step back three. He's like the only 7-footer that can do that consistently. Or, center, I should say, maybe not center, 7-footer. There's a number, and obviously he can operate from there too in terms of passing the ball. He's a strong high post player, and being in the middle of the floor again makes it really easy for him to survey the floor, to hit cutters from all angles. It just shorter passes too. He's not skip passing from the opposite side of the floor from the post, which we've seen him do, and as I said before, get in trouble doing. So he was at the elbows more, able to operate from there, and also the Wolves ran a few more horn sets. We saw this right out of the timeout after the Wolves had the successful challenge midway through, maybe 5 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter. They ran a pin down where Patrick Beverley screened for out of a horn set. It was, I think, Edwards and Towns at the elbows. Beverley sets the pin down. Towns pops up, hits a 26, 27 footer for three. A fantastic play call. They did it a couple more times, a similar action where they're running pin downs out of these horn sets. In fact, I think the next time down, Towns screen for Edwards. There's so many options out of those sets. And while the Grizzlies are a good defensive team, it forces you to make a tough decision in the middle of the floor. Are we allowing Edwards to play one-on-one? Are we doubling Towns in the middle of the floor, trying to double him? Are we going to give up the 28-footer to Towns? I just think that's the smartest way to operate. Secondarily, the other thing Towns did really well is in transition, really kind of in the secondary break, often as the trailer in transition. Towns read the defense really well in this game. He was smart. I don't believe he committed any offensive fouls, at least not of the charging variety. And he was fortunate because he was often getting ahead of steam, a smaller defender on their heels, or I guess early in the game when there were multiple bigs on the floor. Often it was Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., sometimes Xavier Tillman, who started the game and actually didn't end up playing all that much. I think he played 16 minutes. Towns was taking advantage of defenders on their heels, backpedaling, a defense not being set, and or multiple bigs that he can just get right past, right? Like true bigs. Even Tillman, who's obviously more athletic and mobile than Steven Adams, there's a reason he was in the starting lineup. But if Towns has a head of steam, he can sidestep you. He can get past you on the perimeter. He can score in the paint. And unless somebody stands in to take a charge, Towns is really good in that situation, right? He can he can take off from the dotted line and dunk on you, as we saw in game one. We saw in this game a beautiful Euro step to a reverse layup and one opportunities. We saw that early in the game. Towns, and he's a good passer too, as long as he's not doing the passing crash thing or just running guys over in the half court. Karl-Anthony Towns is really, really good in transition when he gets the ball in a face-up situation with the head of steam headed towards the basket, getting downhill. And he was fantastic in those situations in this game. The Wolves got the ball to him more as a trailer. And also, by the way, that's when he's really effective as a shooter. But if you play up to, that's how you get the defenders on their heels, right? They're deathly afraid of the Towns trailing three from the top of the key where he's so deadly. It's his best spot on the floor. So if you get up on him, you're kind of on your heels expecting him to shoot the three. He can pump fake and blow right past you. Towns was really good in those situations. And then as the game wore on, he made quicker decisions. We saw this in game three, even though it was a loss. He made quicker decisions when the Wolves built that second 20-plus point lead in the third quarter of game three. We saw more of that as the game wore on again in this one. They just need to start the game with him being more decisive. And then the last thing is the Wolves ran more false action. By that, I mean, they ran more plays where the defense's attention was drawn somewhere else, and Towns was able to get open, oftentimes for a catch in the middle of the floor. We saw this. There were a couple instances in the first half where Anthony Edwards was the Grizzlies were drawn to him, and understandably so. But excuse me, but the action was actually to get Karl-Anthony Towns open, to get him the ball in the middle of the floor and allow him to operate one-on-one, a lot of times with a smaller defender on him in situations where the double can't come effectively from the defense. And Minnesota did more of that. So what do we need to see more of? More Towns around the elbows, more horn sets, more false actions to get him catches there. And then when he does end up with the ball in the low post or really anywhere, just quicker decisions from Karl-Anthony Towns. That's when the Wolves are at their best. We've seen that peaks and valleys of that trend throughout the season. Sometimes when the Wolves are going well, Cat's playing fast but under control. He's making quick decisions. Then also in transition, if it's not just Anthony Edwards or Malik Beasley, whoever just barreling towards the rim, get the ball to Towns as a trailer, let him go to work as long as he's under control and not getting those cheap charging fouls that he'll occasionally. I think we did see one instance in this game with the off arm where he pushed off. It was a minor push off, but letter of the law, it was a foul. Those are the things that sometimes he gets out over his skis a little bit in transition and commits those silly mistakes. If he can avoid those, he can be so deadly in transition against any team. But that's also, the Wolves are so much better in transition than they are in general in the half court anyway, as long as this goes not just for Towns, but the whole team, as long as they're under control. Okay, I want to talk about D'Angelo Russell. I want to talk about the Wolves defense on Ja Morant next. We're going to do all that here on the show today. First, though, Let's talk about our friends over at Athletic Greens. Our next partner has a product that I use literally every single day. I started taking AG1 because, frankly, I didn't have time to be super healthy otherwise. I wanted better gut health. I wanted to have more energy. And Athletic Greens is the way to go. If you're wondering what it is, I'll tell you. AG1 is a fantastic supplement. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. It's a special blend of ingredients that supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, focus, and aging. Really, it's all the things. It's lifestyle friendly if you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy free, gluten free. It's 100% lifestyle friendly. It contains less than a gram of sugar. There's no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, artificial anything, and still tastes good. It was created when the founder of Athletic Greens experienced a ton of gut health issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine to recover. It cost him $100 a day. So he created Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal nutrition routine on your own. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1 year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NBA network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NBA network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, one more big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Make sure that you check out the Locked On Wolves postcast every game. So the next one, of course, Tuesday night following Wolves Grizzlies, right over at the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel, which is a brand new YouTube channel we're doing with all the other Minnesota sports teams. They're all doing postcasts. So Twins games right now have postcasts going on, Wild games. Then obviously once we get into football season, Vikings go for the same thing. Also, we post the live postcast. I do it with Chalanga Langason of Zone Coverage and C&D NBA Show. We post those on this feed. So if you missed it, you can go back and listen. It's just a 12-minute show. Saturday night following Game 4, we did a live postcast, immediate reactions. So the actual video is live on the YouTube channel for Locked On Sports Minnesota. The audio is posted here on the Locked On Wolves audio channels. So again, the Locked On Wolves postcast is part of the all-new Locked On Sports Minnesota, available live on YouTube right after every game and on all the Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast feeds, and the audio on this feed, Locked On Wolves, anywhere you get your podcasts. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, let's do the defense first. So we'll close with D'Angelo Russell because I think there's more to say about the Wolves defense. The Timberwolves have had the entire season, right? The Timberwolves strategy in general has been an aggressive blitzing pick and roll defense, essentially playing high wall coverage without rehashing the whole thing. If you're a regular listener, obviously in past years, the Timberwolves have done a lot of drop coverage when David Vanterpool was the defensive coordinator. It wasn't great for Towns' skill set. The idea was it could hide some guards that aren't as good defensively as Vanterpool had when he'd been in Portland. But the problem is that Towns isn't great when he's backpedaling. Foul trouble is a major issue. Well, he's relatively mobile for a big. He's just not your prototypical drop big. So in pick and roll coverage. So the Wolves used him a lot in high wall coverage, meaning playing at the level of the screen, and really trying to trap ball handlers. Essentially, the Wolves have been an aggressive blitzing defense. As the year wore on, teams figured out how to beat that coverage, and it was primarily through skip passes, finding open shooters on the opposite side, back cuts, just weak side motion to get open guys. And obviously, then you got to make a good pass, but good teams are able to do that. So the Wolves mixed in some different coverages. They played a little more zone as the year wore on, not a ton, but a little bit more. They played some drop. They mixed in more switching. But against the Grizzlies, in order to contain Ja Morant, which they did very well in the regular season, we talked about that a lot before the series started. Ja's numbers against Minnesota over the 4 regular season games were pretty ho-hum. In fact, he struggled more against the Wolves. His scoring and his shooting were worse than against any other opponent. And that's because of the Wolves' aggressive blitzing scheme. And Ja's a good passer, obviously, but he's a better scorer than he is a passer. So if you force the ball out of his hands, you force him to make the correct read and then a semi-difficult pass, or at least, somewhat challenging pass, that's preferred to letting him get downhill and destroy your defense in the paint. So the Wolves have done that in the series. He had the massive game 1 with 20 free throw attempts. The Wolves were amped up. They committed too many fouls. The officiating was whistle happy, as we've seen in really 3 of the 4 games in this series so far. But then in this game, in game 4, Ja only had one field goal at halftime. He had one field goal, 4 points at halftime. He was scoreless in the first quarter and a half. He was in some foul trouble, but the Timberwolves were so aggressive with their high wall scheme, blitzing the pick and roll, blitzing the ball handler on the perimeter. They were forcing the ball to be skipped to the opposite corner, either skipped or kind of tic-tac-toe, two passes to the opposite corner. And Desmond Bane was often open for a three-pointer. Bane obviously had a massive game. What did he score? Desmond Bane had 34 points, 11 made shots, 8 of 12 on threes. And Grizzlies almost won this game. Desmond Bane was probably the biggest reason why. And to a lesser extent, Dylan Brooks. But Desmond Bane was often the one in the opposite corner, getting open, one of the best three-point shooters in the league this year, probably a top 3 three-point shooter league-wide. And he also got hot from deep, like deep. Like he was shooting deep threes in this game. But so much of his damage, of his 8 threes, I'm guessing, but I'm pretty sure like 5 of them came from the corners. At least 4 of them came from the corners. And it was because of the Wolves' aggressive defense on the opposite side. And Bane is a good enough shooter that the Grizzlies were able to hang around in this game because of that. However, I think this is the proper strategy for Minnesota. The only tweak is to be more consistent with how aggressively you're closing out on him. Be careful with the flybys, close out under control. If you go back and watch, there were a couple examples of the Wolves flying by too aggressively and a couple examples of the closeout not being quite hard enough. They can just be a little bit better with their closeouts. If they consistently are Xing out, meaning getting essentially the shortest contest possible. Oftentimes if Bane's in the corner, it's the defender closest to the elbow that's darting to the corner to contest a shot. The low man's coming up to try and contest a potential swing to the wing, but you'd rather have insert shooter here, anybody on the Grizzlies shooting a wing three than Desmond Bane in the corner. So force the ball out of his hands, force him to put the ball on the floor, force him to use an escape dribble, whatever it is. That's better than nothing, right? So as long as the Wolves are consistently effective there, you'd rather have Desmond Bane shooting even lightly contested threes, I think, or if you do a better job, I shouldn't say lightly contested. If you can do a better job of reasonably contesting his 3-point attempts, you'd rather have that than Ja Morant going downhill with your defense back on their heels, trying to catch up from behind. He's getting downhill. He's getting Karl-Anthony Towns in foul trouble. He's getting Jared Vanderbilt, Jaden McDaniels in foul trouble. You'd much rather have Desmond Bane shooting, 8 to 12 semi-contested threes, in my opinion, than Ja Morant getting to the free throw line 20, 25 times or however many. One of the best in the league at drawing fouls. The Grizzlies are one of the best teams in the league at drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line. Clearly, the better solution here is to not have guys in foul trouble and to just do a better job of closing out on Bane. He's not going to shoot 8 of 12 every game. I mean, he will if you leave him completely wide open, but I don't think he makes 8 threes next game. If this exact same game plays out again and the Wolves contest just a little bit better or a little bit quicker on that rotation to the corner on their X outs to try and contest, and say he shoots 5 of 12 from 3, but Ja Morant is still only 4 of 13 shooting, gets the line just 3 times. He got to the line 3 times in this game. He had 15 assists and only 2 turnovers, but you'll take 11 and 15 and 4 of 13 shooting from Ja if there's only 3 free throw attempts every day of the week, right? The Wolves won this game. Granted, they won by a point, but they were in the driver's seat for much of the game, or at least certainly right in it. They led for most of the fourth quarter, right? Simply by forcing the ball out of Ja Morant's hands. And that is the way that you want the Grizzlies to have to play, because how many times did they force Bane to then pass the ball? To pass the ball around. You'd rather have Tyus Jones, and I know he had a good season shooting the ball, but you'd rather have Tyus shooting a wing three like he missed that would have tied the game with roughly 15 seconds left in that transition play when Ja Morant tossed him the ball on the left, kind of the left slot. You'd rather have Tyus shooting from the wing or from the slot than Desmond Bane shooting an open three-pointer. It doesn't, anybody really. Obviously, Jaren Jackson Jr., Dylan Brooks is a good three-point shooter, but you'd rather have him shooting a wing three than Desmond Bane shooting from the corner. Try and force the ball out of his hands. Worst case, you can test the corner three and you're not getting as much foul trouble. Ja's not getting to the free throw line. Perhaps you're forcing some turnovers. The Wolves could do maybe a better job of deflections. They haven't forced as many turnovers, live ball turnovers as you'd like. Grizzlies still turn it over 17 times in this game, but get a few more hands in the passing lanes. Well, you're forcing Ja to make this tough pass. Then do the next thing, which is to get a deflection and get going the other way, score in transition. So all those things together, I would much rather have that be the situation than have Ja Morant making your whole team, getting in foul trouble, backpedaling to the rim. He's got a head of steam, and you're on your heels in the paint. So I think the Wolves actually executed the plan. Was correct. They executed it reasonably well in this game. Obviously, Memphis still scored 118 points and only lost by 1, but it's preferable to what happened in terms of free throw attempts in game 1, which the Wolves still hung on and won, or really what happened in games 2 and 3 when Ja's a little bit more dominant. The way that they defended Ja Morant should be effective as long as they do a good job rotating on the backside defensively. Okay, I want to close by talking about D'Angelo Russell and why I think he had a much better game than the box score shows. And then I want to briefly touch on one other thing regarding the Wolves' offensive performance before we close out the show. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar of all time. And it doesn't even feel like you're trying to eat healthy when you're eating Built Bars because they legit taste like candy bars. If you haven't tried Built Puffs, you need to check them out. They're the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar. They really taste like a treat, and they're covered in 100% chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite. There's some incredible flavors to choose from, including yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, brownie batter is the one I ordered a couple weeks ago, and it's fantastic. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, including Puffs. Go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be absolutely blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars have just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and just 4 net carbs. They also have 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. There's tons of delicious flavors. If Built thinks a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious and it will be good for you. They're all about the taste. Built Bar always makes it taste delicious first, and then they figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how they do it, but they truly do pull it off every single time. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, let's close the show by talking a little bit of D'Angelo Russell. So you look at the box score, and D'Lo put up 10 points on 12 shots. That's not good. There's no sugarcoating that. It's not efficient. 3 of 12 shooting, 2 of 6 outside the arc. He was only 2 of 4 at the free throw line. He missed a pair at one point in the game. He did have 7 assists, only 2 turnovers. He was one of only 4 Timberwolves players to have a positive plus minus for whatever that's worth. But it was not a good box score game for D'Lo. It was not a good shooting game. Some of the decision making in terms of his shot selection has not been good at all in this series. However, his playmaking was genuinely fantastic in this game. If you go back and rewatch, especially the second half, probably 3 or 4, at least 3, maybe 4 or 5 of those exaggerated ball fakes because he's got such kind of a slow shot motion anyway. He barely jumps when he shoots the ball. And so that lends itself to he doesn't have to be overly dramatic with his ball fake because he's not a guy who jumps, 2 feet in the air on his jump shot. He has a slow ball fake. Guys have to leap at it because he's so effective when he does get shots up. And then now the defense is already essentially you're playing 5-on-4 offensively because the guys in the air, you can step through, you can shoot a floater in the paint, depending on where you're on the floor. You can kick it. A couple of times we saw him kick it to Anthony Edwards for a wide open 3 or a straight line drive to the basket because the defense was having to recover and try and cover for whichever defender had been faked into the air by D'Angelo Russell. The decision making with his passing was very, very good. Um, he didn't make any crazy, terrible passes. We saw Karl-Anthony Towns, we saw Anthony Edwards, both make some really terrible decisions in terms of turnovers in this game. Cat got better as the game went on. He had 4 turnovers in the first quarter and finished with 6, which isn't good, but 2 over the final 3 quarters, all right. But D'Lo only had the 2 turnovers, and they weren't really egregious. If I remember correctly, the decision making was just really solid. The shot selection could use a little bit of adjusting. There was that final 3-pointer without under a minute to play that was hotly contested by Ja Morant, and he was trying to draw a foul at the end of the shot clock. Just not a good decision. There's too much of the ball sticking in D'Lo's hands down the stretch because he wants to be the late game closer, as we know, and we know he can be. The numbers suggest he is actually really good in the clutch, but sometimes the ball movement just is not enough. Take that possession out of it. Really, kind of middle of the fourth quarter, towards the end of the game, there were 2-3 possessions where D'Lo had the offense moving. The ball was snapping around the perimeter. They were driving and kicking, and D'Lo was a big part of that. His playmaking was vital for the Timberwolves scoring 119 points in this game. And really, what the Wolves need him to do is that, but then stop with the contested jumpers, especially late in the game. Stop with, some of the things that we've seen D'Lo do, both when he's going good and when he's going poorly. He still will take 3 or 4 of these ill-advised shots per game. But if he makes them, then it's the D'Lo's kind of everything that he does a lot of really difficult things well, like shooting contested shots, shooting the ball well in clutch situations. But then he sometimes doesn't make the simple play when it's right in front of him. We've seen that throughout the season. This was actually a pretty good example of that. Now, if he shoots the ball, if he makes 2-3 more shots, we're talking about an 18-point game, 18-7 and 50% from the floor. And D'Lo all of a sudden one of the stars of the game because he was that good in terms of passing the ball and his playmaking. It's just the shot selection and the actual shot making needs to be a little bit better than what we've seen to this point in the series, at least in, I believe, 3 of the 4 games. The last thing would be, and this is pretty obvious, but I think it's important to point it out, is making open threes, right? The Timberwolves shot 50% from 3 in this game. The Grizzlies, by the way, were 47% from 3. The Wolves were 18 of 36, which is fantastic. Early in the game, however, they were missing easy open shots. I made a note of that early in the game. I think it was first quarter even. The Wolves were only up by 5, but the Grizzlies were so on their heels. The Wolves could have been up double figures. Taurean Prince missed a couple of open threes. Jaden McDaniels, who had a really poor game, missed a couple of open threes. J-Mac, by the way, had 5 personal fouls in just 10 minutes, missed 2 threes in this game. I believe both were wide open. They were really saved by Jordan McLaughlin, who we talked about extensively in the live postcast Saturday. And I'll talk more about him on Tuesday's show because this was J-Mac didn't play, but little J-Mac, Jordan McLaughlin didn't play in game 3. Chris Finch admitted after the game it was a dumb decision, Finch's word, not mine, to not play him. And actually, the exact quote was, "Sometimes you just make dumb decisions." I think I'll pull up the exact quote for Tuesday, but he called himself out for not playing Jordan McLaughlin in game 3. He was phenomenal in game 4. We'll give him his due on Tuesday. If you want to hear more about McLaughlin and my thoughts on his game, listen to the postcast from Saturday night, or I guess it technically posted Sunday. But at any rate, the bench was not great. The 3-point shooting early, the Wolves were just missing open shots. And again, this seems really obvious, but to win a playoff series, you have to knock down open threes. The Wolves did that really kind of the final 2.5 quarters of this game. And of course, they shot 50% from the field. So I'm not necessarily complaining about the Wolves I'm not at all complaining about their overall 3-point shooting. But early in the game, it was a little bit worrisome because these open threes were just clanging off the rim. Beverly missed a couple early ones. He came on late in the game. But those open 3-pointers, especially from role players. Beasley did one of those things where he played 12 minutes and barely recorded any stats. He had 1 rebound, didn't shoot the ball a single time in this game. McDaniels missed both of his 3-point attempts. Nas missed his only one. So you take out McLaughlin and the bench shot one of 7 from 3-point range. Prince missing 3 shots, McDaniels missing 2, and Reed missing 1. Beasley not even attempting a 3. The role players have to make the open 3-pointers when they get the opportunity. Thank goodness for Jordan McLaughlin. You basically could say he was the reason they won the game, because if he misses, well, I guess you look at the final score, even one of those 4 3-point attempts, the Wolves lose this game. So making open threes, especially role players when they get their opportunity, is a huge part of the series moving forward in what is effectively now a 3-game series. All right. Next, of course, we'll have a show Tuesday. I'll tell you, we'll talk a little more about Jordan McLaughlin, the Wolves rotation, and what we might see in terms of adjustments from both teams heading into Tuesday night. And then, of course, we'll do the live postcast immediately following the game, and then a full post-game podcast that we'll post late Tuesday into early Wednesday, breaking down Game 5 in Memphis. It's a Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m. tip over on TNT. Can't wait to hear what the TNT guys, Charles Barkley and Shaq and those guys have to say about the Timberwolves and about Chris Finch specifically on the pre and post game shows on Tuesday. So that's all upcoming on Tuesday. Thank you again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. A reminder that you can find this podcast anywhere that includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at B Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CK. Thanks again for listening to Locked On Wolves, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And as long as you're making us your first listen, consider making your second listen Locked On NBA. From the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals, Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.